Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. One of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
I want to start with a huge thank you to everyone who listens to this show, has shared it with a friend, or has messaged me about an episode you loved. Because of you, my listens doubled in 2024 compared to my first season in 2023. Whether you emailed me, sent a DM, or told me in person about something you learned or enjoyed, your support and encouragement mean the world to me. This year, I have some incredible episodes lined up, but as we kick off this new year, I thought it would be fun to look back at some of the big questions we tackled in 2024. We explored some everyday dilemmas like when to treat a fever and which milk, plant-based or cows, is really the best choice. And we also dove into some surprising topics you didn't even know you should be thinking about, like the dangers of forever chemicals hiding in your home. These are the conversations you're not going to find anywhere else. They're designed to give you the knowledge and confidence to make the best choices for your family's health. So let's revisit some of the most helpful and eye-opening moments from the past year. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the Pediatrician Next Door. I'm that doctor friend you call for practical advice about your kids' health. I mix the science of medicine with the reality of parenting. One of the really important topics I covered in the past year was about forever chemicals. These are man-made chemicals that are in products that we use every day, and they're called forever because they don't break down in the environment. They are in our takeout containers, our cookware, our water, and in the dust in our homes. And many of these chemicals are disruptive to our endocrine system and can cause diseases, including cancer. I felt like a little bit of an alarmist when I released an episode on this topic, but the more I've learned in the past months, the more I realize this topic is timely and important. The Environmental Protection Agency announced huge changes in legislation last month that should clean up some of the chemicals in our environment and will protect us going forward. I know we're going to hear a lot more about these chemicals this year, so how can you protect your family right now? Here is a clip from episode 47 to remind you of changes you can make. Maybe this is the perfect time to start during this new year. When you are choosing household cleaners and even makeup products and air fresheners, look for labels that say non-toxic, biodegradable, phthalate-free, and fragrance-free. That's the best way to avoid these chemicals that we know cause health problems. Besides finding cleaning brands that don't contain these chemicals, you can limit your family's exposure by reducing the total number of cleaning products you use. This will reduce the range of chemicals that you might be exposed to. For day-to-day cleaning, you really only need water and a mild soap. You can even make your own cleaners with ingredients like vinegar, lemon juice, baking soda, and Castile soap. Next, you want to make sure your water is safe. You can check your local water authority. Some states, but not all of them, require testing for the presence of PFAS, and they have to report if there are any elevated levels. However, not every state does this. If your local level does turn out to be high, you can buy PFAS-free bottled water for drinking and for mixing your baby formula. And if you do that, I'd recommend buying bottled water that contains a little bit of fluoride because you want to protect your kids' teeth. Or just talk to your dentist or pediatrician about whether you need extra fluoride treatment. You can also get a water filter for your home. Reverse osmosis filters are known to remove all of these dangerous chemicals. But kids also use products that aren't designed specifically for them, like they might use adult sunscreen. Even baby sunscreen is not regulated, and it can contain endocrine disruptors like oxybenzone. Similarly, insect repellents, toothpaste, and soaps can contain some of these chemicals. In terms of indoor exposures, paint can be a source of exposure, and manufacturers now make VOC-free paints. Studies of children in recently painted homes show an increased number of respiratory infections right after their house is painted. Be aware of new shower curtains. They can off-gas phthalates, and air freshener sprays also contain stabilizers and fragrance chemicals, and most of those are chemicals that are on the lists of potentially concerning, but don't yet have enough human studies to outright ban them. The other concern is that complications during pregnancy, they have increased over the past few decades. And many scientists explain that exposure to these kinds of chemicals I've been talking about is one of the potential contributors to this problem. Dr. DeWitt at East Carolina University works with PFAS chemicals in her lab, and she's really careful to not release the byproducts of her research into the environment. Here's what she said when asked about how she avoids them in her own life.
I also try to educate myself about where my water comes from. I know that my water comes from the Tar River, and I can look up information for my utility company about the last time they measured PFAS in water from the Tar River. So I can find out what PFAS and what amounts are in my drinking water. I also try to educate myself about companies that have really made a commitment to phase PFAS out of their products and processes. And I try to purchase products from those companies so that I can support their environmental stewardship and their moves towards sustainability.
When you're bathing, you don't need an alternative water source because the chemicals aren't absorbed through the skin. PFAS is found in house dust. That's why kids who are on the floor more than adults are more at risk. So use a wet mop to limit household dust. And consider changing your heating duct filters to HEPA filters. Watch for nonstick fast food containers and microwave popcorn packaging that is nonstick inside. Most brands don't use these chemicals, but it hasn't been completely removed. Replace your old or cracked nonstick cookware with cast iron or stainless steel, or search for ceramic cookware without PFAS. Read the information about the materials the pans are made of. Brands like Caraway, for example, they're nonstick ceramic, and they specify that they don't contain any of these chemicals. Instead of plastic toys, look for wood or cotton toys. I hope that last bit of advice isn't too late. Did you just fill your house with new plastic toys over the holidays? Again, I'm not trying to add anxiety to your life, but these chemicals really do make an impact on ours and our kids' health. Not a lot of research has been done on the effects of endocrine disrupting chemicals on humans. That's why we haven't seen much of a push to get them out of the products we buy, but we will. To hear more about the effects of the substances in these chemicals and all of our products, listen to episode 47 again. I covered off-gassing from paint, from shower curtains, and even crib mattresses, what research tells us about where these chemicals are found and what you can do about it. This is a topic you're going to hear a lot more about this year in the news, and you'll already be an expert. A topic that is at the front of everyone's minds are the mental and physical effects on health from smartphones and social media among kids and teens. I covered this topic and was surprised to learn that not all digital media is bad. This is a more complicated topic for parents than I think anyone expected. Dr. Jacqueline Nisi is a clinical psychologist at Brown University, and she authors the newsletter Techno Sapiens. She shared updates about smartphone use in episode 82, just as the new school year was starting. Here's a clip from episode 82.
I think a lot of us would think, based on what we hear, that the story is very simple. Smartphones and social media are bad for mental health, full stop. But what we know from the research is that it's actually more complicated than that. The research would suggest that the effect of smartphones and social media really depends on how they're being used. There are both risks and benefits, and depending on how students are using these technologies, that will, of course, play a role in how it affects them. We also know that all students are not affected the same way. So some young people, their use of smartphones and social media will have a more negative effect than others, and it really depends on the person in question. The other thing we know is that mental health is really complex. So there are a lot of different factors that go into a young person's mental health beyond just smartphones. And it's never going to be the case that, say, social media is the only cause of mental health concerns. And so I think it's important for us to be keeping in mind that these effects are really nuanced. It depends on a lot of different things, on who students are, how they're using the technology, and all the other factors that are happening and going on in their lives and in their schools.
Well, that's not very helpful, is it? Social media is really broad. You've got the kid who watches videos that teach them a new crafting skill. That's great. And then teens who post a photo of themselves and then obsessively check their like count. The only way to find out how your kids are doing with social media is to ask them. And ask with curiosity, not criticism. Show them what you do on social media. Talk to them about how you get sucked in yourself sometimes. Or share that you choose not to be on social media. And of course, set boundaries about what age they can be on social media. The nonprofit group Common Sense Media published a summary of research done on the use of smartphones called Constant Companion. One of the most interesting things in the report was not the insane number of times our students pick up their phones and check them. It was actually the number of notifications they get. Half of the students they surveyed received more than 237 notifications a day. So this is one action you can take. Ask your kids about their notifications and tell them to turn them off. And while you're at it, do the same for your phone. Wait, hold on a sec. Which brings me to what might be a bigger deal, and that is the effect that smartphone use is having on the rest of their life, like schoolwork. What effect is smartphone use having on kids? Here's Dr. Nisi.
We have some good evidence around how smartphones impact behavior, academic performance, socialization, and a lot of it is in line with, I think, what we would expect. So we know that smartphones can be distracting. They can distract from attention in class. They can also distract from socialization, so talking to the people around us, which in turn can impact mood. We know that those things can have an effect and that smartphones can play that role. We actually do have studies that look at when students are randomly assigned to either have their phones with them or not during class periods, that those who do have phones with them tend to show worse attention, worse memory for what's covered in the class. So we do have some evidence that when phones are present and available, that they can be distracting. There are a couple studies that look specifically at phone bans and basically what happens when schools implement policies around limiting students' phone use. Those studies vary a lot in terms of what they consider a phone ban. So in some of those studies, it's phones are turned off and put away for the entire school day. Some of those studies are looking at just, students aren't allowed to use their phones for non-academic purposes in the classroom. But we do have some evidence from those studies that would suggest small effects on academic achievement, which includes test scores.
A number of schools did try to ban phones during the school day this year, so we may hear more about what effect this had on behavior and school performance as a result of schools that experimented with this. Managing your child's screen time, phone use, and social media is constantly evolving as technology changes. I'll continue to cover the latest on these topics to help you with new approaches in your own family. Up next, the answers to two of the most common questions I get about kids. What should you do when a child has a fever? And do we really need to drink cow's milk? What is the most common reason that parents take their kids to the pediatrician? It's fever, of course. It's the most common reason because so many different conditions can cause a fever and because fevers can make kids look horrible. So it's scary. So this year, I recorded an episode about why kids get fever and, more importantly, when you should worry, when to go to the doctor, and when to wait it out at home. Here's a clip from that episode where I share when to worry about a fever, and I'm helped out here by my friend, pediatric ER doctor Joelle. Kids get really high fevers pretty commonly in comparison to adults who really don't get fevers as often. We pediatricians think more about the pattern of the fever than how high the number is. So that's the one thing you want to pay attention to. In general, a fever that improves after medication, or if the child is playful in the middle of the day, and then the fever just comes back after a nap or in the evening, that's a pattern that suggests they are sick with a virus infection, and that's going to run its course and be no big deal. We think fevers come out at night because our cortisol levels drop, and that unmasks a fever, and during the day, cortisol is higher. So you can fake a body out like this. If you give steroids to someone with a fever, their fever is going to go away, but they might still be really sick. There is a really interesting medication that treats fever that you can only buy in Mexico, and it's banned in the United States. It's called neomelubrina. It gets rid of a fever really well by blocking white blood cells, which is really bad. You need your white blood cells to fight off infections. So basically, it makes you have an immune dysfunction that can kill a kid, but at least they don't have a fever anymore. So we do not recommend neomelubrina. You do need to worry about a high spiking fever that lasts all day in a child that continues to look tired or ill, even after you have given them medication for their fever. The other thing that matters a lot is the presence or absence of other symptoms. We humans don't often think about the importance of the lack of something, but sometimes if a piece is missing, that can be very important as a clue. For example, the absence or lack of cough is one of the most important signs that a child does have strep throat. Strep throat is characterized by fever, sore throat, red spots on the palate, and no cough. But we don't pay as much attention to the no cough part. If a child has a fever and a runny nose and congestion, we don't worry because they have a reason for their fever. They have a respiratory tract infection. But what if they have fever and no other symptoms? To me, that is scary. We don't know where the fever is coming from. Regarding a fever without other symptoms, we start to worry that a child has bacteria in their blood or cancer or a rheumatologic disease. There are a few rare infections that can cause a fever and not really have many other symptoms. So fever without other symptoms is a reason to see the doctor. And there's one exception to this. It's one that I talked about with my friend Joelle Odman. She's a pediatric emergency medicine specialist, and here's what we talked about.
One of my favorite stories is where you have really high fever, like crazy high fevers, 104, 105, for like 3 to 4 days in a row. And a lot of these kids have come into the ER over and over and over for these high fevers. You've got these crazy workups. And then the fever goes away. And the moment the fever's gone, you have this amazing rash. It's like the entire body, but no fever at the same time as a rash. And it's completely normal. It's roseola. It's just a viral infection that is super safe, not dangerous, but it's fever, 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 rash.
We tend to worry a little bit more about fever with rash, but if the fever happens and the fever suddenly goes away and you break out in a rash, that's a completely different story than if you persistently have fever and the rash appears at the same time. We pique our interest about that. So fever and rash at the same time is worrisome. And fever that breaks and is followed by a rash is nothing to worry about. I always say that rash is a sign that the body has fought off the virus. You don't need to treat that kind of rash at all. I've got 2 more scenarios on my list of when to worry about your child's fever. They are fever and neck pain, or fever and doesn't want to move or doesn't want to walk. That is concerning for meningitis in the case of neck pain. And not wanting to walk, to me, that can indicate something like a ruptured appendicitis. That's more common in a really young kid because older kids usually tell you they have belly pain before their appendix ruptures and before they get a fever from it. I've also seen kids with fever who have a kidney infection. They usually vomit, but sometimes they don't really want to walk. So fever with neck pain or doesn't want to move or walk, that's the first one. And the other is fever and one place on their body hurts. Usually it's one joint, because that can mean a bacterial infection in that one place. Kids can get bacterial infections of their joints or even an infection of a bone. So fever and one place on the body that hurts needs to see a doctor. There's lots more in this episode about when to worry, how to treat a fever, and when to treat a fever. If you want to hear more, go back and listen to episode 59. It's a good one to share with your partner or grandparents. The other topic I find myself getting questions about is picky eating and other food-related questions, especially about whether kids need vitamins and whether their child really does need to drink milk. Sorry, Dairy Council, but we don't really need milk. It's just a convenient way to get protein, lots of minerals and vitamins, but if your child doesn't like to drink it, parents, I think, are afraid to tell me, or they try to make their kids drink milk. And the non-dairy milk beverage alternatives, we can't call them milk, they aren't all created equally. Some are just sugar water. So I covered, do kids need milk? And I discussed all the other options in one of my most popular episodes. So how do you choose? Here's a clip from that episode. It doesn't really matter that much if you choose 1%, 2%, or whole milk. If you have a skinny kid, I'd probably choose whole milk for that little bit of extra fat. I usually tell parents to just have them drink the milk that your family drinks. Organic milks don't appear in studies to be worth the extra price that you have to pay for them in terms of their health effects, but they do tend to have higher amounts of antioxidants and the healthy polyunsaturated fatty acids. The nutrient content of a cow's milk does depend entirely on what the cow ate. So if price doesn't matter, then you may want to buy organic milk, but you don't really have to from a health perspective. Cow's milk has saturated fatty acids and cholesterol, which might be a health consideration if you're worried about things like obesity, type 2 diabetes, or high cholesterol that runs in your family. Plant milks, on the other hand, have vitamins and phytocompounds that make some people more inclined to choose them for their health benefits. There are randomized research trials that show when people cut back on foods that are high in saturated fats and replace them with nuts, fish, vegetable oils, and plant milks, their risk for heart disease does go down. And without a doubt, plant milks have a lower impact on the environment than animal foods. There are a lot of studies that support this. However, in the future, dairy farmers are starting to use things like methane digesters to help reduce carbon emissions, and they now use special feeds to try to lower the amount of methane that dairy cows produce. So the impact is getting lower. However, they still use a lot of water to make cow's milk. So oat and soy milk are actually the most environmentally friendly of all the choices. Probably the best tip I can give you overall is to read labels on all the dairy alternatives. Alternative milks sometimes have a lot of added sugars, so that's probably the first thing you should look for. And it's best to choose one that has added vitamin D and calcium. But I've always recommended that everyone take a vitamin D supplement anyway, so it's not so important if you're already taking one. Alternative milks tend to have less protein and fat and less calories in general, and they tend to have more water in them, which can mean better hydration. So for teenage athletes, plant-based milks might actually be a good choice if they like the way it tastes. Having less fat, protein, and calories could also be a plus for adults who are watching their calories. But for kids, the lower fat content, the lower protein and calories, they may be a consideration because kids still do need protein and fat for growth. Non-dairy milks don't measure up to cow's milk for kids under age 2. We know that. And there hasn't been any research about older kids and adults. So if you want a dairy-free alternative, there are 2 of them that provide similar amounts of protein and vitamin D. They are soy and pea protein. Soy milk tastes good. Unsweetened soy milk has about half as many calories as cow's milk, but almost as much protein. It does have less fat, and it even has a little bit of fiber, and it usually has just as much calcium. Though the truth about calcium is that most people get plenty of it from their regular, well-rounded diet, and it's not that crucial to get it from milk. I know, it's kind of surprising. The boxes of soy milk on the shelf, not the ones in the refrigerator section, they often have the fewest ingredients. Like a lot of them are just water and soybeans and don't have any added oils or other additives that you don't really need. So this might be a convenient way to keep milk stocked in your house and reduce trips to the store. Soy milk has all the essential amino acids and is the most nutritionally balanced and closest in nutrient profile to cow's milk. It's also great for baking with and using in mashed potatoes. It has enough fat and protein, so it works well in a latte. And when you bake with it, it browns well. Pea milk also tastes great, and it has almost as much protein as cow's milk. The brand that dominates the market here is called Ripple. It is nutrient rich, but it's also the most expensive, and it's a little more highly processed than the other options. It's my top choice if you have a milk and soy allergy, which is fairly common to have both of those. It also works great in lattes and baked goods. I also like pea protein milk because it has fiber, protein, and calcium, as well as omega-3 fatty acids. It's actually made from yellow split peas, and it has a little bit of oil added to it. A lot of plant-based milk manufacturers add oils to improve the mouth feel. And one other feature you can look for among the milks is you can look for a label that says barista blend. They have added emulsifiers and other additives that make the milk frothy when it's steamed. So if you're frustrated with gross, watery steamed almond milk, try a non-dairy milk made for steaming or choose oat, pea, or soy milk. Grain drinks like oat and rice have a lot of simple sugars, so they're not the best choice if you're already eating simple carbohydrates at breakfast like cereal or breads or biscuits. In the first 5 years of life, rice-based drinks are not a good idea because there's possibly arsenic in it. Because when rice grows, it pulls arsenic from the soil and the irrigation water, and it concentrates it into the plant. Rice milk also doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it, although I do love horchata, and it has some documented health benefits. Horchata is thought to be anti-inflammatory, so check out some of that drink. Oat milk is the newest milk. It was invented in the mid-1990s. It tastes awesome because it has the most sugar in it, and it really seems to steam well for lattes. Oat milk is great for baked goods because of its higher carbohydrate content, so it browns well. And oat milk has about the same calories as dairy milk. It's high in calcium and vitamin D when it's fortified, so read the labels of oat milks. For young kids, look for oat milks that are higher in fat and lower in sugar. It also is low in protein, so be sure that kids eat foods that are protein rich if you primarily use oat milk at home. If you want to hear more about a few of the other products on the grocery store shelves and some of the concerns about health effects of plant-based milks, you can hear the rest of the story back in episode 68. This year is sure to bring a lot of changes due to our change in government leadership, as well as emerging technologies. And all of these changes have an impact on how we talk to our kids and how we support their healthy development. Thank you again for your support of the show. It helps me a lot if you spread the word and share the show with others. If you haven't yet, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps me get more attention for the show, which helps me to continue bringing you more episodes. I wish you all a very happy New Year. For more from the Pediatrician Next Door, find me on the web at pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com. If you've got a question about the weird things kids do, send an email to hello@pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com for a chance to hear your voice on the show. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the Pediatrician Next Door. This show is produced by Red Rock Music. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever it is you're listening. I'll be back next time with more.